is going to be a fun-filled, but even better, an educational Paper Professor episode. Okay, so during a rainy day, when finally the sun comes out and you see a beautiful rainbow, what colors do you see? Well, let's see. We see blue, red, yellow, green, the colors of the visible spectrum. Wait, we're missing one. Hi, I'm Jim Kohler, the Paper Professor. So what we don't see is magenta, or some call pink. What? You look again and magenta isn't there. What again? So when we look at the visible spectrum, lo and behold, there is no magenta. As shown by the spectrum, it contains violet, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, but no magenta. Okay, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, I can see magenta. But let me see if I can explain why we think we can see magenta, but the eye really doesn't see the color at all. Light comes from all sorts of wavelengths, and we as humans can detect light in many of those wavelengths, but not all. For example, we don't see infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, radio waves, etc. Now, the reality is light itself doesn't actually have a color. Isaac Newton observed once that the rays are not colored. In them, there is nothing else than a certain power and disposition to stir up the sensation of this or that color. Our brains just associate different wavelengths with different colors. In wavelength terms, the range of 380 nanometers to about 450 nanometers are seen as various shades of violet, for example. Magenta, however, doesn't have an associated wavelength. The reality is, our brain just kind of makes it up when other information comes in. Let's think about our eyes. As shown by the image of our eyeball, our eyes have photoreceptor cells called rods and cones. The rods detect light, whereas the cones detect color. The rods have nothing to do with color, only light, down to very bright, down to very dim. Cones, which actually require more light before they really turn on, help us figure out the colors we see. This is why in dark areas, we often can't tell what color things are, as the rods can detect low light, but the cones can't. As shown by the image, there are red, blue, and green cones. As most creative people know, everything those three cones detect, therefore, is actually just one of those three colors. Our brains kind of fill in the gaps that the three colors don't. So when we see a yellow school bus, the red and green cones are triggered. Our brains interpret that as yellow. And our bananas, school buses, and lemons, for example, are better off for it. This is why, again, when you see a rainbow, if you look between the red and blue or red and green light, you see yellow. Okay, so what about not seeing that color magenta? Well, magenta occurs when the red and blue cones are stimulated. But that's a problem if you think about it. Why? Well, because unlike red and green making up yellow, those two colors sit next to each other, so to speak, in the spectrum. Red and blue don't connect at all, as they sit on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Hence, they can't make up magenta. Look at the visible spectrum, and you will see that. Keep in mind, the spectrum is a line, not a circle. Our brains need to do something with all that information, meaning the red and blue cones that are triggered, and the magenta seems like, to the brain, a pretty good solution, although I have to admit, for no obvious reason. Echoing Newton's observation, the magenta color we see is all in our heads. Our brains put it together for us since our eyes don't see it. So it's actually a sensation that arises in your brain. Someone once said that if we're going to make up the colors anyway, well, there's no reason to limit ourselves to the stuff found in the visible spectrum. Our computer monitors, smartphone screens, TVs, etc. take advantage of this conversion process. But skip the first process, as there again are no yellow wavelengths, for example, being used. All the colors the monitors show us are actually just a mix of red, blue, and green light. I mean, we do the same in printing. We mix cyan and magenta ink, and you get blue, or more like a violet. Mix red and yellow ink, and you get green, and so forth. This is known as subtractive color. Colors of light, red, blue, and green, are known as additive color. So, I know we all think we see magenta, but the truth is, we know it's all in our heads. I hope you found this episode fun and enlightening. So make sure you have subscribed and click on the bell to assure you get the latest Paper Professor episodes. With that, I'm Jim Kohler, Sylvamo's Paper Professor, and I sure hope to see you in the next Paper Professor episode.